there are very clear cognitive differences between males and females. Can we dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, one of the keynote talks that I give is called The Neuropsychology of Feminine Leadership, and it's based on looking at the differences between the male and female brain when it comes to leadership qualities. And so there's some really interesting differences between the male and female brains. And I'm going to focus primarily on the female brains and kind of these cognitive superpowers that women have. But that is not to say that our male counterparts don't have these same superpowers. They're just more consistent, right? Women have kind of this ebb and flow, so they get access to kind of these extra cognitive abilities throughout the course of a month if they know how to navigate, which is really interesting.
Is that the women's intuition? Would that be the women's intuition that's like common?
That's one of them, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, you know, the woman's intuition, scientists are actually finding that that's a real thing now.
Yeah,
we're actually able to see that in brain scans.
All of my best friends in the world are women, and they always have little nuggets, and I'm like, where'd that come from? Like, what?
Yeah, it's our little superpower, and most of us don't even realize that we have it. But really interestingly, if you look at the male and female brain, there's a lot of differences in the way that they function. One of the largest brain scan studies that was ever done looked at over 40,000 male and female brains in the United States, and what they noticed is out of 80 brain areas measured, that the female brain was more active in 70 of them out of 80. Now, that in and of itself doesn't really tell us much, besides maybe women are a little more hypervigilant, which isn't necessarily a good thing, right? However, what it does tell us is that the two brains operate differently. Now, when we go deeper into this and we actually look at the different areas and what's going on, we see that women's brains are much more active in areas where there are high densities of receptors for estrogen and progesterone, right? So the brain is actually modulated by the ebb and flow of these hormones. And that is why we get different cognitive abilities throughout the month. So specifically, these areas are the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. Now, what's interesting about these three areas specifically that are much different than the male brain is that these are areas of the brain that are involved in leadership qualities. So things like decision-making, emotional intelligence, navigational ability, verbal acuity, things like this, communication. These are all areas that are really important in that, including also memory consolidation. So that's why women have this innate ability to be leaders when it comes to their brain function and their cognitive abilities. However, you know, when we look out into modern society, that's not necessarily the story that we see, right?
Oh, I was just thinking, like, of all the major CEOs. I mean, the CEO of YouTube is a woman. I'm trying to think, like, major companies, who the CEOs are. I'm sure there's a few that I'm not thinking of, but like, look, we've never had a female president of the United States. We have a female vice president now, but we've never had a female president. And it's like, why? If they have all these leadership abilities, I would think there would be, and of course, let's not forget, all of those male presidents have had female first ladies that have probably consulted them using those skills that you're describing. So it's not like the influence hasn't been there, but that's really fascinating. And it is a shame that culturally women are seen as inferior leaders compared to men, when, with what you're saying, just biologically, you're wired differently than we are.
Exactly. Now, that's the reason why we don't see as many women in these leadership positions. It's because women are misrepresented and misunderstood and misguided in terms of their health and function, and even their physical and mental performance, right? And because of this, because of lack of understanding of the female biorhythm and the ever-changing biological needs that happen throughout the course of a month, women are expected to thrive in environments that are static and consistent. And that, again, we know that that works really well for our male counterparts because that's how they're designed. But for women, it doesn't work that way. So when we're plopped into an environment, an infrastructure, and a support system that is meant for us to be operating consistently every single day and have the same basic needs met every single day, it's setting us up for failure. Now, this goes back to what we see when we look at the burnout rates. Women experience burnout 2 to 3 times more than men. So, and then we look at where the leadership roles are, right? Women only represent 18 to 20% of leadership roles in the United States, and that's including business owners, C-suite, managers, supervisors, all higher level positions. Women are only 18 to 20%. And with that burnout rate, now we're starting to see the big picture. We're starting to see what's happening. We're misunderstood, we're not supported properly, and we don't even know how to operate in partnership with our body because we're not even taught how our body works.
Did you go keto and thought you had to give up wine? Well, let me introduce you to Dry Farm Wines. It is the world's first sugar-free alcohol that is lower than your typical wines, organic, made at local farms that do it the right way. Most of the wines that you buy are from 3 really big companies, loaded with additives and preservatives, so many dozens of those kinds of things. You don't want all that junk in your wine. So go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and they will ship you these wines. And just because you listen to this podcast, Dry Farm Wines is going to give you a bottle in your first order for just 1 cent. Go to dryfarmwines.com/Jimmy and you will get your bottle of wine for just 1 singular penny. Go check them out. Dry Farm Wines, you guys. It's wine o'clock somewhere. Let's go get some wine. Man, and there's a lot of moving parts to this story as well. And internal biases, and like we could go down the list of all the reasons that's going on there. But this is so fascinating. Like, I feel like there needs to be a revolution in who we are as males, who we are as females, like really defining those differences. Of course, our culture is kind of going crazy right now with some of the differences between the ones and kind of convoluting it a bit. But that notwithstanding, there are very physical differences between these two. Now, earlier you made a statement, and we didn't really kind of pick at that scab. We're going to do it now. That biohacking tends to work very well for women. Not that it doesn't give men benefits. I'm the king of ice baths. I'm the king of red light therapy and all the things that I do. But why women and biohacking, and what specific kind of biohacks are they seeing the best results from?
So it's actually not the biohacks that are important for women. It's the biohacking approach, the N=1 approach, the self-experimentation. Because for women, because our cycles are all over the place, right? No woman's cycle is perfectly the same every single month, 28 days aligned with the moon, right? Maybe some women, but that's not the case for the majority of us. And so it can be kind of all over the place. And not only to mention that, but we can't follow the recommendations that are out there and trust them fully if they're done on research that's done on male bodies only, right? So that means that we have to experiment on ourselves. And you also bring up a really good point about ice baths, about, supplements, about red light therapy, about fasting. So I'll just talk about fasting and ice baths, for instance, for women. Now, women have to take special considerations when it comes to their biohacking approach. Their biohacking and their biohacks have to match their physiological signature of each of the 4 phases of their biorhythm.
Yes.
So because, right, they're 4 different people, so they can't do the same biohacking routine every day. They have to have a different one for each of these different signature times within their physiology. So when we take something like fasting, for instance, women, if they fast or even intermittent fast consistently over the course of a month, every single day, that is going to cause damage to their hormones and then damage to their metabolism and damage to their overall health and function. So women cannot take a consistent approach with something like fasting. They have to find the pockets of time within their biorhythm where it is actually safe to do so.
Yes.
There are times when it is safe. For instance, during phase one, which is the menstrual phase, I call this the shed phase of the biorhythm, because this is when their levels of estrogen and progesterone are at their very lowest level
Yeah.
throughout the entire course of the month. Because of that, their metabolism slows down, their caloric need slows down, and there's some significant changes to their physiology at large, which we won't get into all the nuts and bolts. But what's important to know is that if you want to practice some kind of a regular fasting routine as a woman, you have to find the time periods when it is safe for you to do so. The menstrual phase is one of the safe times to
Yes.
do that.
And the week before the menstrual phase, don't go super low carb, keto,
Exactly.
and don't
Yes.
fast that week either.
You
Um,
got
it,
it.
it's so fast. It's so fascinating to kind of learn the differences of the way women need to fast versus men.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you kind of teach yourself about this, it's really fascinating. It opens your eyes that it's not just here's what to do, now do it at some random time. That the timing matters, who you are
Yeah.
matters, where you are with your stress level matters. There's so many, like I said earlier, moving
Absolutely.
parts.
Yes. Now, you mentioned stress. This goes back to the cold exposure biohack, right? This is another one that women have to be very careful with because of the ebb and flow of estrogen and progesterone. A woman's nervous system is modulated so much so that, for instance, during the second phase, the follicular phase of her hormone cycle, and I call this the plant phase of her biorhythm, during this second phase, this is marked by an increase, a steady increase in estrogen. As estrogen steadily increases, so does your stress capacity. So
Yeah.
you get more of a parasympathetic quality to your nervous system and you have a higher stress capacity. So that's a great time to be doing things like cold exposure. Now, towards the end of your luteal phase, the fourth phase, this is what I call the grow phase. During that phase, it's important to understand that your nervous system is getting more of a sympathetic quality to it as you go through that phase. And so your stress capacity, your stress threshold goes down. And so you don't want to be doing things like cold exposure, especially if your stress is not in check regularly.
Yeah, I've been doing a challenge all year long, Kayla. As a biohacker, you're going to love hearing this. So I've gotten in, I have the Morosco Forge. And so I've
Oh,
got
nice.
to 32-degree temperature water every single day since January 1st
Woo!
for 5 minutes a day, every day. And
Wow.
I'm still here,
Ladies
still
listening,
alive.
do not do that.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying, that you're giving me things to tell women, hey, look into this more. I will definitely point them in your direction to learn more. But that's really fascinating. By the way, if you ever have aspirations to write a book someday about this kind of four phases, you could
I am,
have a
yes.
title for you, and it's just tentative. The Four Phases of Me would be the title.
Mm.
It like
I have a couple of working titles, but
ah,
yes, that book is going to be coming out at the end of this year, along with another book I'm writing on feminine leadership.
wow. Well, see, I knew you were already on this. One of your friends is Sean Wells. He probably put the little
Yes.
book bug in your ear, and I've written 10 books. And so you got people around you that have written a few books.
I'll be getting your advice for sure.
Yes, yes. Wow. So, man, I mean, we could go in a million directions. What is something that is a big difference that's not honored well enough between the sexes, between males and females? What is something that people bungle badly?
Hmm. I mean, I would say most things. The biggest thing is that, have you ever heard the term consistency is the key to success?
Yes.
Right? We've all heard that at some point by somebody, if
And I
not
believe,
multiple times. Um, so consistency is actually the killer to success for women. Women require flexibility and they are always changing. They're in constant flux. Whereas men, consistency is the key to success is a real thing. So understanding that women need to operate differently is really the key to raising feminine health and really supporting the women in our world.